The National Crime Agency has hailed its success in convicting 18 members of an international gang which smuggled in billions of pounds worth of drugs into the country. The NCA says it is the UK's biggest ever drugs investigation.
It started like any other delivery, a shipping container, a list of vegetables, and a lorry headed straight into the heart of the UK. Onions. Garlic. Ginger. Perfectly ordinary cargo on the surface. But this wasn't food for supermarket shelves. Hidden among the produce was a deadly fortune: heroin, cocaine, cannabis packed tightly, masked by the sharp stench of garlic and sealed in layers of deception. At the center of this criminal tapestry stood Paul Green. A man who called himself a businessman, but in truth, he was the mastermind behind what would become one of the most audacious drug smuggling networks in British history. Authorities say Green and his network moved over 240 shipments across the UK. Shipments disguised under legitimate haulage companies. He operated from shadow warehouses in the Netherlands, using the back roads of Europe to flood Britain's streets with narcotics. But how did this quiet man from Widnes rise to control billions in contraband? Who were the allies, the informants, and the people who enabled his empire to thrive? And more importantly, what mistake brought it all crashing down? This is not just a story about drugs. It's about betrayal, ambition, and an empire built on garlic and lies. This is the story of Paul Green, the UK's invisible kingpin. This is Crimelines UK, real stories, real crimes. If true crime is your thing, if you want more chilling stories like this one, real criminals, real investigations, real consequences, then hit that subscribe button. Now, let's go back to where it all began. Just outside Liverpool lies the town of Widnes, an unassuming corner of Cheshire with a proud industrial past and a working-class heart. Known for its chemical plants and freight links, Widnes has long been a through route for goods heading into the northwest. The River Mersey to the west, motorways to the east. This is a logistics hub. A place where things pass through quickly and quietly. It's also where Paul Green was born and raised. Neighbors described him as quiet, polite, someone who rarely caused trouble. The kind of man who waved from his driveway, kept his lawn neat, and lived in the same modest house for years. Just another face in the community. Green wasn't flashy, not in the way most criminals are. He didn't crave nightclubs or expensive holidays. Instead, he played the long game. A father of two, Green was known for school runs, barbecues in the garden, and the occasional pub quiz down the road. He blended in perfectly because he wanted to. In his early 30s, Green founded several small logistics companies perfectly legal, on paper. He specialized in refrigerated freight, often transporting food imports from the Netherlands, Spain, and beyond. And that's where the opportunity revealed itself. Garlic, ginger, onions, pungent, bulky, and handled by the ton, perfect camouflage for the tons of narcotics he would soon begin to shift across borders. With access to established trade routes and years of experience in customs clearance, Green knew exactly how to manipulate the blind spots. He wasn't just exploiting weaknesses in the system, he was the system. His neighbors had no idea. Behind the barbecue grill and friendly nods was a man coordinating multi-million-pound shipments of heroin and cocaine through ports, airports, and depots, often just miles away from where his children slept at night. The story of Paul Green isn't one of sudden riches or violent turf wars. It's a slow-burning deception. A criminal who understood that sometimes, the best place to hide is right out in the open. He was meticulous. Patient. Invisible. But no matter how perfect the cover, eventually, someone makes a mistake. Before the drugs. Before the billions. Before the arrest. Paul Green was just another kid from a working-class estate in Cheshire. The son of a factory foreman and a care assistant, he grew up with modest expectations. He wasn't a troublemaker. Not in school. Not on the streets. What set him apart wasn't aggression, it was patience. From a young age, Green showed a sharp eye for logistics. First as a forklift driver, then in warehouse management. He learned the trade from the inside-out: stock rotation, customs codes, driver rotas, and how to make things disappear from a manifest without anyone asking questions. In 2004, he founded his first freight firm. Nothing flashy, just a few lorries and some cold storage units. But that business became his gateway. Over the years, Green expanded into cross-border refrigerated transport, specializing in high-volume, low-suspicion goods, fresh produce, frozen poultry, herbs and spices. It was around this time that he crossed a line. Not a dramatic leap into criminality, just a quiet agreement with the wrong client. A test run. A few kilos of cocaine stashed under pallets of frozen chicken. And it worked. No inspection. No delay. That first taste of illicit profit gave Green a new appetite. He didn't do it alone. Stephen Martin, a longtime associate with links to Merseyside gangs, brought muscle and local contacts. Mohammed Ovais, a smooth-talking operator with financial acumen, managed the shell companies and helped funnel money through international accounts. Together, they formed a triangle of power. Logistics. Distribution. Finance. They registered dozens of front companies across the UK and the Netherlands. One warehouse near Rotterdam served as the loading point, another outside Luton was their distribution hub in England. These were not back-alley operations. The books were clean. The names were fake. And the drugs? Hidden inside consignments that smelled strong enough to mask almost anything. By 2016, they were moving tons heroin from Pakistan, cocaine from South America, cannabis resin from Spain, all routed through their produce shipments. Their specialty? Hiding high-purity drugs within the one thing customs hated touching: raw garlic and onions. One border officer later admitted, "You can smell that stuff for days. We didn't want to go near it." That's how clever Paul Green was. He didn't outgun the system. He outthought it. By 2017, operations expand. 2018, £17 million shipment seized in Calais but goes unconnected. 2019, Green's network peaks. By 2019, Paul Green wasn't just trafficking drugs, he was orchestrating a continent-wide smuggling pipeline. And still, he lived in the same modest home in Widnes. Because while he built a drug empire worth billions, he also knew the most dangerous thing in this world is attention. But in this game, one mistake is all it takes. And Green's next move would bring him closer than ever to the beginning of the end. Between March 2016 and September 2018, Paul Green and his organization orchestrated more than 240 illegal shipments, each one a precisely timed movement of narcotics hidden within legitimate food cargo. The estimated street value of the drugs they moved: £7 billion. This wasn't just a drug operation. It was an empire built on supply chains, customs loopholes, and silence. The trick was simple, but effective. The pungent stench of garlic and ginger was enough to mask even the sharpest canine detection. The drugs, heroin, cocaine, cannabis, were heat-sealed, vacuum-packed, and then layered beneath legitimate produce. Pallets would be shrink-wrapped, the outer layers purely food. Inside, buried in the middle, bricks of Class A substances. These consignments were so well prepared that even trained customs officers missed them repeatedly. The scale of the operation was staggering. Paul Green's network controlled multiple depots across the UK and at least one warehouse in the Netherlands. Containers would be packed in Rotterdam, driven by licensed hauliers across mainland Europe, and then enter Britain through Dover or the Channel Tunnel. To avoid suspicion, Green employed legitimate haulage firms, many of whom had no idea they were carrying anything illegal. We'd get the jobs through subcontractors. All seemed fine, good money, consistent routes. Never knew we were moving anything dodgy, an innocent haulier stated. Some of these companies were carefully selected precisely because of their clean records. Green's team would embed one of their own men within the warehouse staff or dispatch teams to ensure a specific lorry was loaded, sometimes even altering loads after customs inspection. These clean drivers became unwitting couriers in one of the largest drug networks Europe had seen. As the network grew, so did its complexity. Whenever a company drew attention or was flagged by border officials, Green would shut it down, erase the paper trail, and reign corporate under a new name within days. This adaptability became their greatest strength. Some front companies only existed on paper, never a real office, just a P.O. box and a VAT number. Others had fully operational warehouses, part-staffed with people who believed they were simply working for a food import business. Green's reach extended far beyond the UK. Heroin came in from Afghanistan via Pakistan. Cocaine sourced through Spain and the Netherlands, often from South American shipments routed through port cities. Cannabis resin pressed into blocks and hidden in deep frozen produce. Shipments were timed with precision. Vehicles were GPS tracked not for security but for control. Green wanted to know exactly when every van would arrive, how long it stopped, and where it might have been exposed. To maintain secrecy, Green and his inner circle relied on EncroChat, an encrypted phone system used exclusively by criminals across Europe. Messages were timed to delete automatically. Phones were wiped remotely. They communicated in nicknames, metaphors, and coded language. Paul Green was simply known as the Big Fella, a term that appeared repeatedly in communications intercepted by European police before the network collapsed. By late 2018, the operation had become so large, it was starting to unravel. Green wanted more. Bigger shipments. Faster turnover. More risk. And with each new move, more people were brought into the fold. Not all of them were as disciplined. Not all of them stayed silent. For 2 years, Paul Green's empire thrived. Invisible. Profitable. Untouchable. Until one night in Amsterdam. When one man under the influence made the mistake that would begin the end. In the shadows of the UK's bustling ports and quiet industrial estates, Paul Green's criminal enterprise thrived, eluding law enforcement for years. However, the intricate web he wove began to unravel when the National Crime Agency, NCA, took notice, initiating an investigation that would expose one of the most sophisticated drug smuggling operations in British history. The NCA's attention was drawn to an alarming influx of Class A drugs saturating UK streets. Traditional policing methods had failed to stem the tide, suggesting a highly organized network operating with impunity. Intelligence pointed towards an operation utilizing legitimate businesses as fronts, with shipments arriving from mainland Europe. The sheer scale and consistency of these drug imports raised red flags, prompting the NCA to establish a dedicated task force to delve deeper into the matter. Deploying a combination of human intelligence and technological surveillance, the NCA began monitoring key individuals suspected of involvement. Undercover operatives infiltrated logistics hubs and freight companies, posing as employees to gather first-hand information. They observed patterns in shipping manifests, noting recurring consignments of perishable goods from specific European suppliers. These shipments often contained strong-smelling produce like onions, garlic, and ginger, ideal for masking the scent of concealed narcotics. Wiretaps and intercepted communications played a pivotal role. The NCA, collaborating with international partners, managed to decrypt messages exchanged between members of the syndicate. These communications revealed coded language and meticulous planning, highlighting the gang's efforts to evade detection. The use of encrypted devices showcased their awareness of law enforcement techniques and their determination to stay ahead. A significant breakthrough occurred in the Netherlands. Gang members, after transporting a consignment, left their van unattended to indulge in a drinking session. Dutch authorities, acting on a tip-off, seized the opportunity to inspect the vehicle. Inside, they discovered 57 kilograms of amphetamine concealed beneath layers of legitimate cargo. This seizure not only provided concrete evidence of the gang's modus operandi but also underscored their occasional lapses in operational security. The investigation was fraught with challenges. The gang's use of legitimate businesses as fronts meant that any overt action risked implicating innocent parties and disrupting lawful commerce. Their adeptness at rapidly dissolving and re-establishing front companies made tracing their activities akin to chasing shadows. Furthermore, the international dimension of their operations necessitated coordination across multiple jurisdictions, each with its own legal frameworks and bureaucratic hurdles. The gang's counter-surveillance measures added another layer of complexity. They frequently changed communication methods, employed lookouts, and conducted their own background checks on associates. This heightened sense of vigilance meant that law enforcement had to exercise extreme caution to avoid compromising the investigation. Despite these obstacles, the NCA's relentless pursuit, combined with international collaboration, gradually tightened the noose around Paul Green and his associates. The meticulous gathering of evidence, patient surveillance, and strategic interventions culminated in a series of coordinated raids, marking the beginning of the end for the syndicate's reign. The dismantling of this operation not only curtailed the flow of vast quantities of narcotics into the UK but also sent a resounding message to organised crime groups about the reach and resolve of law enforcement agencies. After years of meticulous investigation, the National Crime Agency, NCA, in collaboration with international law enforcement agencies, initiated a series of coordinated raids to dismantle Paul Green's expansive drug smuggling network. These operations marked the culmination of efforts to apprehend key figures and disrupt the syndicate's operations. In the early hours of a designated day, NCA officers, supported by local police units, executed simultaneous raids across multiple locations in the UK and the Netherlands. The primary target was Paul Green's residence in Widnes, Cheshire. Officers breached the property, apprehending Green without incident. At the same time, Stephen Martin was detained at his home in Bolton, and Mohammed Ovais was arrested in Benage, Manchester. Dutch authorities, acting on intelligence shared by the NCA, raided warehouses in Utrecht, arresting Johannes Vesters and Barbara Rijnbout, who were instrumental in orchestrating the European side of the operation. The raids yielded substantial evidence of the gang's illicit activities. In the UK, authorities confiscated significant quantities of heroin, cocaine, and cannabis concealed within shipments of onions, garlic, and ginger. The strong-smelling produce was strategically used to mask the scent of the drugs. Additionally, large sums of cash, encrypted communication devices, and detailed records of transactions were recovered, providing further insight into the operation's scale and reach. In the Netherlands, equipment used for packaging and concealing drugs was seized, along with documentation linking the warehouses to the front companies established by the syndicate. The magnitude of the bust captured national attention. Major news outlets reported extensively on the operation, highlighting the unprecedented scale of the drug smuggling network. The public expressed a mix of shock and relief, with many residents in the affected communities voicing concerns over the extent of criminal activity in their vicinity. Community leaders praised law enforcement agencies for their diligence and commitment to ensuring public safety. The arrests and subsequent seizures dealt a significant blow to the drug trafficking landscape in the UK. The removal of such a prolific network disrupted the supply chain of narcotics, leading to a noticeable decrease in drug availability on the streets. Law enforcement agencies continued to monitor and address the power vacuums left in the wake of the syndicate's dismantling, ensuring that emerging groups did not exploit the situation. The operation also underscored the importance of international collaboration in combating transnational organized crime, setting a precedent for future joint efforts. The successful takedown of Paul Green's network not only curtailed a significant source of illegal drugs but also sent a clear message to other organized crime groups about the reach and effectiveness of coordinated law enforcement actions. In the United Kingdom, the legal framework governing drug-related offences is primarily established by the Misuse of Drugs Act 1971. This legislation classifies controlled substances into three categories, Class A, B, and C, based on their potential for harm and misuse. Class A drugs, which include heroin and cocaine, are considered the most dangerous, and offenses involving these substances attract the most severe penalties. Specifically, the Act stipulates that the supply, production, and importation of Class A drugs can result in a maximum sentence of life imprisonment, an unlimited fine, or both. Paul Green and his associates were implicated in the large-scale importation and distribution of Class A drugs, activities that fall squarely within the purview of this legislation. Given the magnitude and severity of their offenses, they faced the upper spectrum of sentencing provisions outlined by the law. The trial of Paul Green and his co-conspirators took place at Manchester Crown Court, marking a significant chapter in the UK's legal history due to its unprecedented scale and complexity. The court was presented with extensive evidence detailing the operations of the syndicate, including the smuggling of substantial quantities of heroin, cocaine, and cannabis into the UK over a span of 2.5 years. These drugs were ingeniously concealed within shipments of strong-smelling produce such as onions, garlic, and ginger to evade detection. Paul Green, identified as the ringleader of the operation, faced charges of conspiracy to import Class A drugs and fraud by false representation. His right-hand man, Stephen Martin, was charged with similar offenses, reflecting his pivotal role in orchestrating the financial aspects of the operation. Another key figure, Mohammed Ovais, was charged with conspiracy to import drugs, highlighting his involvement in coordinating the logistics and distribution networks essential to the syndicate's operations. The culmination of the trial resulted in substantial custodial sentences for the principal defendants. Paul Green, sentenced to 32 years imprisonment. Stephen Martin, received a 28-year prison term. Mohammed Ovais, sentenced to 27 years in prison. These sentences underscore the gravity of their crimes and serve as a deterrent to others engaged in similar illicit activities. During the proceedings, the prosecution emphasized the extensive harm inflicted upon society by the defendants' actions, noting that the operation facilitated the widespread distribution of dangerous drugs across the nation. The defense, while acknowledging the seriousness of the offenses, sought to highlight mitigating factors, including any expressions of remorse and the personal circumstances of the defendants. The sentencing had profound repercussions not only for the defendants but also for their families and the broader community. Family members grappled with the stigma and emotional turmoil resulting from the convictions, while communities affected by the influx of drugs experienced a sense of justice and relief. The case highlighted the far-reaching consequences of drug trafficking, extending beyond the immediate legal ramifications to touch the lives of countless individuals. In summary, the trial and subsequent sentencing of Paul Green and his associates represent a landmark in the UK's fight against organised drug crime. The case serves as a stark reminder of the severe penalties associated with such offences and the unwavering commitment of law enforcement agencies to uphold the law and protect society from the scourge of illegal drugs. In the months and years following the collapse of Paul Green's empire, the ripples of his criminal enterprise have continued to spread, touching not only the institutions of law enforcement, but the very communities and industries that unknowingly played a role. The Paul Green case has since become a defining benchmark in the evolution of UK drug enforcement policy. As one of the most significant seizures in British history worth an estimated £7 billion, the operation forced the National Crime Agency, NCA, Border Force, and regional police units to re-examine how they detect and intercept large-scale smuggling operations. New policies were implemented to intensify surveillance at UK ports, especially on seemingly innocuous goods like food produce. Authorities began leveraging more real-time data analytics and scanning technologies. The government also announced new task forces focused specifically on illicit logistics and EncroChat-style encrypted communications, which Green's syndicate exploited heavily. Moreover, the case highlighted the urgent need for stronger international cooperation, particularly with Dutch authorities. The seamless coordination in this case became a template for joint cross-border operations. While the headlines painted Green as the big fella, a master tactician in the narcotics world, at home, his arrest left behind a fractured reality. Green was a father, and reports suggest that his children, who lived comfortable lives funded unknowingly by drug money, faced public scrutiny and private trauma following his conviction. His extended family, once respected in Widnes, experienced community backlash. Local businesses once affiliated with Green's freight connections either folded or rebranded in an effort to distance themselves from the scandal. the reputational damage was swift and irreversible. Stephen Martin and Mohammed Ovais also left behind families, wives, children, elderly parents, many of whom had no awareness of the vast criminal machinery operating behind closed doors. Their stories are a grim reminder of how drug crime doesn't just destroy users, it unravels the lives of those closest to its perpetrators. Perhaps one of the most damning revelations from the case was how easily the syndicate infiltrated and manipulated the UK's freight and logistics sector. Green used legitimate companies as a smokescreen. Many of the haulage firms were completely unaware they were transporting concealed narcotics inside crates of ginger and garlic. This exposed a systemic weakness: lack of stringent checks on goods imported from EU-based warehouses. Since then, freight companies have faced increased regulation. The Department for Transport, in collaboration with HMRC, rolled out new guidelines on container tracking, random inspections, and compliance reporting. Several training programs were launched to help hauliers and warehouse staff identify suspicious shipments, and supply chain vetting processes were tightened across major UK ports including Dover, Felixstowe, and Liverpool. Paul Green's arrest didn't end the fight, it exposed how adaptable and well-financed criminal organizations truly are. While his network was dismantled, law enforcement agencies acknowledged that similar syndicates continue to evolve, learning from the mistakes Green made. Yet the victory was significant. Not just for the drugs removed from the streets, but for the message it sent: no matter how clever the disguise, no matter how high the value, the law can and will catch up. The legacy of the case rests in its lessons. It reinforced the need for continuous vigilance, robust intelligence sharing, and the human stories at the center of these massive operations. In the end, the operation wasn't just about garlic and onions, it was about trust, deception, and the colossal cost of crime. Paul Green built an empire on produce. But in the end, his empire rotted from the inside. And when it fell, it didn't just take down one man, it revealed the depth of a system many never knew existed. For over 2 years, Paul Green's empire moved silently through the UK's ports, hidden behind shipments of garlic, ginger, and onions. It was one of the most sophisticated drug networks Britain had ever seen. But even the best-laid plans can rot from within. 32 years. That's how long Green will spend behind bars. His partners? Not far behind. But the damage they caused ripped communities, addicted lives, shattered families. Those scars may last longer than any sentence. So we ask you, was justice truly served? Did the punishment fit the crime? Or should the UK rethink how it deals with drug lords like Paul Green? Let us know your thoughts below. Your voice is part of the story. Like, subscribe and turn on notifications to never miss the crimes lurking beneath the surface. This is Crimelines UK.